Hey everyone, happy Wednesday and good evening. My name is April Fournier. I use she, her pronouns. I am Danae, a citizen of the Navajo Nation and the National Program Manager for Advanced Native Political Leadership. I'm also an at-large member of the Portland, Maine City Council, the first Native person to hold this office. I am so excited that you're joining us this evening. I want to share a little bit about who we are and what we do before I introduce our fabulous guests. So Advanced Native Political Leadership is a project created to address the need for increased Native representation in elected and appointed offices throughout the country. So we know we need equitable representation in elected offices and to increase Native representation in office to secure a reflective democracy for all Americans. So one in which our country benefits from the leadership and talents of Native people and is responsive to the issues that we bring forward from our communities. So historically, we've been affected by so many different factors in the way that we've been able to engage in running for office, in voting, and in participating in our democracy, especially Native women. We have been underrepresented for a very long time. And so we've not been able to reach every level of government yet, but we're on our way. So according to the 2020 US Census and our own research, we are about 0.03% of the elected officials, where we're actually 3.4% of the population. So if we were to reach parity, where we had equal representation based on our population, that means we need to elect more than 17,000 Indigenous leaders at all levels of government out of the 520,000 elected offices nationwide. So we have some work to do, but conversations like these, increasing visibility, having more connections into communities is how we're going to make that happen. So we are doing a lot of investment in representation, in increasing that visibility, and making sure that we're growing that population. So we have lots of exciting work happening here at Advance, and we're so grateful for your energy and your support in this work. So now I'm so excited to introduce you to our guest for this evening, and I'm honored to have the opportunity to share space with her in our community here in Maine. And then I get to learn and grow from the work she's done on behalf of all Native peoples here in Maine. So our guest this evening is the incomparable Penobscot Nation Tribal Ambassador, Maulian Dana. Ambassador Dana, thank you so much for joining us this evening, for taking time out of your busy schedule to be here. And I will give you the floor to say hello to everybody.
Thank you, April. It's great to see you. And yes, my name is Maulian Dana. I also use she, her pronouns. I'm the Penobscot Nation Tribal Ambassador and just very happy to share space with you as well, and looking forward to our discussion.
Awesome. So Ambassador Dana has done so much here in the state of Maine. She has an extensive background in activism around ending the use of Indian sports mascots, as well as replacing Columbus Day with Indigenous Peoples Day, both which have actually become Maine state laws. She's also commissioner for the Permanent Commission on the Status of Indigenous, Racial, and Maine Tribal Populations. She serves on the Maine Climate Council, is president of the board for Wabanaki Alliance, and serves on many other boards and organizations. She's also the proud mother of 3 daughters. So on top of all of the incredible things you do, you are raising 3 gorgeous children, one who just recently joined us and is absolutely adorable. So just amazing to have you here, and thank you so much. So I have all kinds of fun questions. Some we'll get to that are more fun, but we'll talk about the business questions first. So you have definitely made some incredible things happen for the Indigenous people here in Maine. You've been very active and had a strong voice in your community in Maine at large since you were actually very young. So thinking back to kind of when all this started for you, can you share a little bit about what got you started in advocacy and in using your voice?
Absolutely. So I was really lucky to grow up with my family members in tribal leadership. My father served as a Penobscot Nation tribal chief. His name's Barry Dana. My great aunt, Donna Loring, served as our tribal representative. So I was kind of bearing witness at a young age to struggles over tribal sovereignty and self-determination. And, I was testifying in the legislature about the racial slur for Indigenous women on place names in Maine. And I was kind of coming of age in an era where a lot of these issues were front and center. And what kind of gave me the big push was seeing Indian mascots being used in schools with peers my age. We didn't have one in my high school, but going to other schools and seeing these games on TV, I would see one team would be the Warriors, one team would be the Indians. They would have the face paint on, and they would be jumping around and doing their fake, Indian dancing. And that was what really sparked something in me. And it went from anger to confusion and thankfully to action. I think that I had a really good support system and mentors in my life that didn't really let me dwell in that anger. It was kind of like, okay, we've awoken these feelings, so let's educate, let's advocate, let's talk to these schools, let's talk to your peers. And it was a mixed bag, because sometimes that was very scary. As a teenager, you're trying to fit in, you're insecure a lot of the time, and just trying to make your way in the world. So to have this added layer of these things bother you, so you're going to be speaking about them and educating people, that could get heavy at times. So I think that, being shoved, I guess, by myself, really, to want to ease this anxiety and this anger that I had by doing something about it, that was what really propelled me on this path. And it definitely hasn't always been easy, but it has always kind of, made me feel better about these things that bothered me at my core. That was my outlet for trying to ease that tension in myself, was doing something about it and being an activist, even as a teenager.
Amazing. And you mentioned something important that I think we don't always have front and center, and the importance of mentoring and having someone who can kind of talk you through all of those really challenging feelings and kind of what's the first step, or how do you move into action. So I wonder if you could talk a little bit about some of those mentors and how they helped you move from that place of anger or frustration into action.
Yeah, thankfully, there is a great group of people already doing work on removing these Indian mascots in Maine. Esther Ann comes to mind. My aunt Rebecca Sock Beeson were two women that were really speaking out about this and mixing it up quite a bit. And my father Barry, he really helped me put a voice to a lot of these feelings. I guess he had been an Old Town Indian. That was his high school, which is right next to the reservation. So when I started getting angry about these mascots, he started really unpacking his high school experience, and it got him to a place where he was angry too. And he started thinking, oh, well, that wasn't just good-natured high school antics that were going on. That was racism, and people were targeting me, and that was harmful. So, going through that with him was super helpful in a mentoring sense. And then the Maine Indian Tribal State Commission was working on removing these mascots, and a lot of good folks were already in the mix. And I think that having some young people like myself ready to speak up about it gave them a great asset as well, because it was, let's get into where the kids are and have a kid do this. But they were super supportive. Some of these rooms were very scary. I walked into one room, and just about every kid had on an R word sweatshirt, and they booed me when I went to speak. And thankfully, the adults were very nurturing and supportive, and made sure I was safe. And that's been something right on up through my activism. I've been really lucky that people are always there to make sure that I'm safe, especially once I became a mother. That was an extra consideration for me. So I think that doing this work, you never know where people are and how they feel and what they're going to do. So I think that having that support system and not doing anything alone is really important. And sometimes I have felt like I got a lot of credit for things, and I really always want to stress that it is a village, that just because I kept showing up and may have been the loudest voice in the room, sometimes there are so many people that have been doing this work around removing Indian mascots and changing Columbus Day to Indigenous Peoples Day, and the tribal sovereignty work. And that's, if I didn't have that support as a teenager, I absolutely would not have been on this career path and been able to help do these really awesome things.
Absolutely. So a little bit of reciprocal mentoring happening, it sounds like. And so you mentioned what you're able to do now. So you were the first and so far the only Penobscot Tribal Ambassador. So I wonder if you can talk a little bit about how that came to be, and then what does a Tribal Ambassador do?
Sure. So the tribal nations in Maine collectively were called the Wabanaki, and that confederacy is made up of the Penobscot, the Passamaquoddy, the Mi'kmaq, and the Maliseet. And there also are Abenaki people who were displaced from their homeland, but they live here in Maine as well. So together we're the Wabanaki. And each tribe, an important part of tribal sovereignty is each tribal nation gets to decide how they want to be represented in government and how they want to manage those relationships with local, state, and at the federal level. So dating back to the 1800s, the Penobscot Nation had a representative to the state legislature, and that representative would be able to sit on committees and draft legislation and sponsor legislation, and could sit in the chamber and speak on the floor, but could not vote. So, because a couple considerations when thinking about that, one is the tribes didn't want to be just another municipality, so they felt like if they had a vote, like Portland, Old Town, Bangor, Penobscot Nation, that seemed not the most appropriate thing. And also with how we have our legislative districts, a vote would kind of be double representation because our tribal communities are already in legislative districts. So that there was reasons for that, but it doesn't always feel equal when our tribal reps are sitting in the chamber but not voting. Their names on the screen, but no light, lights up when they vote or don't vote. So the Penobscot Nation and Passamaquoddy and Maliseet have at different times throughout history had this tribal representative. And in 2015, tribal state relations had gotten to such a sour place with former Governor LePage and some of the things that he was doing and harming this relationship. We had a court case with current governor, former Attorney General Janet Mills over the Penobscot River in my community. And just kind of a lot of these things were adding up to something that didn't really feel like an equal relationship. And it didn't feel like we were getting what we were putting in. So the tribe to remove our representative to the legislature, and Passamaquoddy did the same thing. So in 2015, there was a large event at the State House. The tribal reps walked out. I think it was a sad day in some ways, but a very empowering day in other ways. I was there. I didn't know at the time that I would be having anything to do with tribal representation in government. I just wanted to be there and support. So the Penobscot Nation decided to create an ambassador position. And the idea with the ambassador role is to have that government representation, but to kind of work outside that system that hadn't felt or fair or respectful to us for a very long time. So instead of sitting in the chamber and sitting on committees, I get to advocate for legislation and kind of nurture those relationships with lawmakers and testify on bills, but it's not within that system that has been so oppressive to our people throughout the years. Now, the Passamaquoddy did decide to re-elect a representative, and that was formerly Representative Rena Newell, who is now Chief Rena Newell, and they just elected a new representative, Aaron Dana, and they're doing some fabulous work. So that nothing is better or worse. We're just, each tribe is doing their, thing right now as they would like to do it. And I see great progress made on, no matter how we're representing ourselves. And something I'm really loving is the unity with all the Wabanaki communities right now as we look at policy.
Absolutely. So kind of tailing then on the back of that unity, I think that is something that's very unique, where the tribes have come together to form this group, which you're a part of. I think you're the president of the board for the Wabanaki Alliance. And so I think what's been really amazing just from, a resident of Maine and a non-Maine tribal member, but still working for Native representation, to see the different types of communication and advocacy and education that this group has been able to do. So I wonder if you could talk a little bit about what the Wabanaki Alliance has been able to do this year, as well as, what do you think they might be looking at for this coming 2023?
Yeah, I'm really proud of the Wabanaki Alliance and the work that we're doing together. And I would probably have to take it back to 1980 to fully answer the question. So in 1980, there was a lawsuit. I'll give the very condensed version. Essentially, the tribes had discovered that about 2/3 of the state of Maine had been illegally taken from the tribes because the treaties were never ratified by the federal government. So there was a lawsuit and a settlement, and the settlement probably should have just dealt with land and money. There were kind of extra provisions added in about jurisdiction and blocking our access to federal legislation. And this 1980 Maine Indian Land Claim Settlement Act and the Maine Implementing Act together have really been the cloud hanging over tribal state relations. The tribes maintain that we never ceded our sovereignty. The state basically sees us as municipalities because of our agreement to this settlement. So this has been a very thorny issue for over 40 years now. So the Wabanaki Alliance kind of came to be because the tribes were really coalescing around updating this agreement and addressing it through legislation. There was a task force created between tribal leaders and lawmakers of the state, and that task force produced legislation that didn't quite get to the finish line, but there's a whole story. But the Wabanaki Alliance got to come together on a very focused common cause, and that is amending the 1980 agreement. And in the process of coming together around that, we've been able to work together on a variety of issues. So it's been really, I think it's been almost 3 years now that we've been meeting and kind of beefing up this organization. And it's a great tool because I think the tribes have so many priorities and we are very distinct communities, but it's great to have one place to come together with tribal leadership and hash all these things out, decide, which ways we're going to go with legislation, and also just to talk about what's going on in our communities and where we might be able to support one another. And I'm really excited, to get to be a part of that from the ground up.
Absolutely. And I think that's such a great point, in that while we are our own sovereign nations, we do have to work with the systems that are in place at the state, municipal, and national level. And so what we see, especially what I think is very interesting about the Wabanaki Alliance, is that you have so much power coming together. And when you have so many voices coming together to really show that decision-making power and show that support and show that presence, it was heard, I think, in our state capital and resonated, throughout the state. And I think people are very much more aware now, just by the sheer number of letters of support that came in around that legislation, and the number of letters to the editor and the number of articles that were out there. I think that's something that wouldn't have happened 10 or 20 years ago. It's this consistent power building that's just been, I think, so important. And so another thing that we talk about when we are doing our trainings, yay! Hello,
there's
Iris. Oh, we love it. So when we talk about our trainings that we're doing, of course, we are working on those that are running for office, but also people are appointed to different positions. So not just you're running to be elected to certain positions, but there are also appointments that are out there. And so I know you've been a commissioner for the Permanent Commission on the Status of Indigenous, Racial, and Maine Tribal Populations. That is a mouthful. And so I wonder if you could talk a little bit about what does that body do and what kind of impact have they had as it relates to the other roles. Can you still hear me? I think you froze a little bit.
Yes, So the permanent is that better?
Oh, now you're back. Yes.
All right.
Oh,
Okay,
technology.
cool. If it happens again, so the permanent commission is really the baby of Representative Rachel Ross of Portland, who is currently the assistant majority leader in the legislature and just a very dynamic and powerful, not just woman of color leader, but leader period in the state of Maine. And the idea behind this commission was to really elevate the voices of historically oppressed and marginalized groups in Maine, and also, a lot like we talked about with Wabanaki Alliance, bring these groups together with our specific unique needs, but see where we can support one another and where we can kind of push for greater equity overall, and Jen has the power to submit legislation, advise all three branches of government, hold public hearings and listening sessions, and I think that it's been, a very unique thing in Maine history to have these groups come together. We have all of the tribal communities represented on the commission. We have the immigrant community. We have historically disadvantaged communities. We have the unhoused people are represented. So it's been really inspiring, I guess, to have our meetings and work on our projects together. We have really staffed up in the past year or so. We have an acting executive director, a community engagement person, and seeing what was kind of something in this full-fledged, really colorful and dynamic organization has just been incredible. So, and restorative justice, and we've had our big first big public listening session where we heard from the listserv, and yeah, really happy to do.
Yeah, I think we have the internets are not on our side this evening. I wonder, Ambassador Dana, if you could maybe try and turn off the camera and see if that cleans it up a little bit. We'll just give it a minute to even itself out. Thank you, everybody, for your patience. We know technology is something that we're all still trying to navigate, but it is also something that is really important for access. And so I know one of the things that we've heard from the state level as well as the local level is by being able to have Zoom access to meetings, by being able to allow public comment and public engagement through Zoom and through Zoom attendance, it really has removed a lot of the barriers. And so definitely we're going to go ahead and stay live while we're waiting for Ambassador Dana to rejoin. But while we're waiting, I do also want to share that we do have some national trainings coming up for our leadership training. So it's our signature training program. That'll be coming up. We have another class in February and then a class in March. And so at the end of this meeting, we'll go ahead and post some links for you to visit our site and be able to rejoin. Ambassador Dana, are you back with us?
I believe so. I came on for my phone. My internet died on my laptop, so apologies.
No worries, no worries. We just continued to cruise right along, and we figured we'd get you back.
You're such a pro.
So if you could just circle back to just kind of the structure of that commission and some of the work that you've done this year and what might be happening next year, that's about where we lost you.
Okay, awesome. So the Permanent Commission is made up of commissioners from various kind of historically oppressed or marginalized groups. So each of the tribal communities has a representative. There's the unhoused population, there's immigrants, there's labor. So we're really taking into account a lot of the voices that aren't always heard in state government. And the work, of the past year has been really staffing the commission. We have an executive director, community outreach. So getting all of those people, understanding the statutory obligations. We're advising on some key pieces of legislation, and these range from the racial impact statements to restorative justice to truth seeking, and we're really what I love most about the Permanent Commission is that, we come together every couple of weeks and we're able to bring really unique perspectives from so many corners of Maine and do a lot of this really cool work together. And I can't think of any other time in Maine history where something like this has been attempted, where it's not really a state agency, it's not really a nonprofit, it's somewhere in the middle, and it's this really rich collective of voices advising state government, and lawmakers would not be hearing from people like us otherwise, probably.
Absolutely. And one of the things, as you were rejoining, we were talking about is with the addition of Zoom and with the kind of improvements that we've made in technology, the ability to access public engagement and access the legislature and access, I know for Portland, we still have hybrid meetings for city council. So we allow the public to join and give public comment, whether they're joining by Zoom, calling in by Zoom, or they're in chambers with us. And we have gotten incredible feedback from so many of our community members that by opening that door, they've had a chance to participate in their democracy. And I wonder if you see that with, especially with where you live and where you're situated in Maine. It's farther north. There's a long way to travel to sometimes go to these different meetings. And so I don't know if broadband and internet access has been one of the conversations that the commission has talked about as well.
Yeah, I don't know if we've tackled it specifically, but it's definitely a consideration. And, as you can see tonight, rural Maine doesn't have the best internet at all times. But I think, in my experience as ambassador, coming from, my first 2 years on the job, going to Augusta 3 or 4 times a week and all that driving, to the last 2 or so of the pandemic, participating remotely, I have seen a very different mix of people able to attend these meetings. And of course, not everyone is connected to the internet or has the smartphone or the laptop or the means to do so. But yeah, it's something the commission has certainly talked about as we look to come back into person on some things and try to meet where, we're pulling in the tribal communities are in very spread out remote places. So as we look to do meetings in person, what that looks like and how to make that as inclusive as we can.
We always love that equity lens for sure. Mm-hmm. And so we had the opportunity to see Iris, and we talk about the travel and some of the different things that are required when we are Native women and we step into these roles. So as a mom, can you talk a little bit about what it's been like on this journey into leadership, having your girls along for the ride, what your work means for their futures, and then how does that drive the work that you're doing?
Oh, it's probably the number one motivator I have is making this state and this world a better place for my kids. As cliche as that is, I think that's what drives a lot of us in the work that we do, because we have to think about the next generations and how we will leave this world and they will find it. So my older children are 13 and 15. I had them when I was 22 and 24. My youngest daughter is 5 months old. So I am now 38 and embarking on this journey all over again. So I think that just seeing how things have changed from, when I was a mom the first time up until now, it's scary and it's overwhelming, but it's also really encouraging and good. And I've been able to, you know, as a young mother, I just hustled. I worked like a bunch of jobs at any one time. I brought my kids with me. I was able to you know, nurse them each for a year. So they were always kind of with family or with, you know, daycare situations where I could pop in and feed them. And up till now, where I'm, you know, much more secure in my career, and I got a parental leave paid this time, and I'm able to kind of, you know, really nurture my daughter into the world. What a big difference. I'm calmer, I'm more focused, I'm so much older, but I have so much more energy, because I can rest more and you know, do my work when I need to and leave it when I need to. So just you know, I saw how unkind the world could be to that young mother in poverty, woman of color, up until now, where I've been able to really advocate for myself and my daughters all these years, and I got really good at it. So now I'm in a much more comfortable and healthy place for my newest daughter. So, you know, as far as the issues, you know, facing them, I clearly think about, you know, as all three of my children are girls, you know, this missing and murdered Indigenous people really, you know, epidemic that you know, plagues our communities, and the statistic that 1 in 3 Indigenous women will be the victim of a violent crime or a murder. You know, as before I had Iris, my youngest daughter, I used to say, I am the mother of 2 daughters, so I have to hope that one person's going to be me. Now that there's 4 Indigenous women in my family, where do I go from there? So I, you know, I'm always thinking about how to make things safer and better for them. And I think with the Indigenous, you know, invisibility, that's really the underpinnings to so many of our problems. You know, people don't, if they don't see us, if they don't know us, if they don't hear us, they're not going to care about us as much. So when you see these acts of violence and these people going missing, and this jurisdictional holes, and people aren't really looking, I think that the more we can be seen and heard and felt, and telling our story, the more we'll convey that humanity, and hopefully the less harm our people will see, and the more justice we'll see when there is that harm done. So I'm always kind of thinking of that dark and scary part of being who we are, but then there's also the strength and the humor and the love and the pride, and there's you know, I think with the increased representation in every place you look, you know, in politics and entertainment and media, my kids get to watch Reservation Dogs and see themselves reflected on that big screen. I think that's so powerful. So I feel kind of those same nagging, scary things throughout my motherhood journey, but I also can't help but feel hopeful and really good about this next, you know, 16 years or so with Iris and where we'll be, you know, when she's Carmela's age now, you know, how the world will look.
Absolutely. I think that is one of the most incredible things about what we get to do. One, serving as leaders, we now have the ability to have a voice in spaces where decisions are made, where votes are taken, where money is committed, where when we think back, even in recent history, that wasn't the case. And so it's really, really exciting to think about what's coming next for the generations that come after us as we continue to build this visibility and build this power. And so you mentioned the epidemic of the MMIWP Two-Spirit issue. And so one of the things that we know is, you know, this violence is perpetuated by the dehumanization of Indigenous peoples. And one of the ways that that happens is when we're objectified and not seen as equal, or not seen as something more than an object. And so, of course, I know you've worked on mascots and native mascots and the harm that happens there. And so we've been able to pass a law in Maine that makes those go away. But I wonder if you could talk a little bit about a little bit of the science behind mascots and why they're harmful and what that does to Native youth and their mental health, and then how that perpetuates, as we get older, why it is so important to remove them, and make that change.
Oh, absolutely. So I think when you think about these racial mascots, you kind of have two buckets. You have the obviously offensive, if you're using a slur, if you're dancing around, Chief Wahoo from the former Cleveland Indians with the big red nose and the red face, and when things are clearly kind of goofy and wrong and racist, there's that. Then you also get when the picture is really pretty, and when it looks honorable, and when people say, well, we're proud and we want to be brave like you, and you're warriors, and you're beautiful people, you also get that side of mascot use. And so I think part of our education around this is understanding that it's all harmful, and it's all dehumanizing, and it's all taking our people, turning them into an object, turning them into something you can slap on a basketball jersey. And part of that is taking things that are really sacred to us, like eagle feathers, war paint, the traditional dress and the regalia, the dances, the chants. And when you're making a mockery of that, and when even if you're not making fun of it, if you're still doing it, that's stealing from us. And that sends us a message that these things that are so central to our identity and so sacred to us are just trinkets that you can steal for your own. And they're really, pushed down to a level far below where we've been raised to know where they should be. So I think, something I talk about a lot is, as a child, I watched the movie Peter Pan by Walt Disney. And that movie, there's the scene where Peter Pan goes to Never Never Land, and for some reason there's an Indian camp. And I don't know why they're Never Never Land. And it's a really, they sing a song called What Makes the Red Man Red, and it's kind of one of the more blatantly offensive and racist pieces of pop culture and entertainment that we have about Indigenous people. So I remember being, 6 or 7 years old watching this cartoon, and that was the first time I felt like, who I knew I was as a Penobscot kid was so different from who, society clearly thought I was. And that conflict is hard to reconcile when you're a little kid. So I don't think I did. You kind of shove it away, and you kind of compartmentalize and think, oh, well, whatever. So then as you get older, it doesn't go away. It sneaks back up on you, and you think, oh, well, I must be stupid. I must be silly. I must look dumb. I can't speak English, because that's what so many people are seeing in these cartoons. And then it permeates everything. It's in these mascots. It's on the Land O'Lakes butter. It's Walt Disney's Pocahontas. It's everywhere you look are false images of who we are. And sometimes they're pretty and great, and sometimes they're ugly and racist, but all the time it's not our truth. So you have groups like the American Psychological Association coming to terms with all of this, and recommending that schools don't have these Indian mascots, because they don't just harm Indigenous students, they harm all students, and they put these falsehoods in our schools, and they're bad for relationships between Indigenous students and other students, for sure. And, one story that I tell when I was working really hard on one of the mascot cases in Maine, I was in like an online forum on some article talking about this thing, and there was a young man from a tribe out west, and he was commenting, arguing right along with me with these local townspeople wanting to defend this mascot. And he sent me a private message, and he said, I don't know why we even bother. Indians just lose all the time. And I thought, this was a kid, he was probably 14, 15 years old, somebody I'd never met. And we were coming together on this feeling of just being defeated, and why do we bother? And, clearly the power structure is not set up for us to have a voice or for anyone to hear us. So when we are able to make progress and change laws and change these mascots, I think about kids like that who can see us win sometimes and can see us be heard. And it doesn't always have to be, throw your hands up, I guess we lose again. So I don't mean to reduce it to winning and losing, but it is nice to feel that we've progressed in a way on this issue. And, when I first started 20 plus years ago talking about Indian mascots, I got laughed out of a lot of places and people just didn't see this as a big deal. But something I'm really proud of we've been able to do is to tie this into the bigger issues, the poverty, the crime, the lack of recognition of our sovereignty, because like you posed in this question, when you see people as less than human, that's how you're going to treat them. So this mascot issue and the stereotypes and the false representation, it really bleeds into so much more of what we're dealing with. So I think that the changes are good and hopefully we'll see all of the national teams finally change. We're on a good roll with those too. So I think we're getting there for sure.
Absolutely. And I think today is a good reminder, friends that are out there listening on the airwaves, that we are 5 days before Halloween. We're coming up on a weekend and there's all kinds of parties that are going to be happening all over the place. And it's, I think, a good reminder, we are not your costume. We are not for your appropriation, and our culture is not for your use. So just a little reminder there, because we know we're going to see it. It seems to be getting a little bit better each year, but it's still out there. Amazing. So I have some fun questions now for our lightning round. So I hope you're ready for these. So the first one is, what is your most played music playlist right now? So if you were to like fire up Spotify or Apple Music or whatever your music service is, what's going to be that most played?
My most played music is The Doors.
Yes. Nice.
I always come back to them.
I love it. I love it. Mine is the Foo Fighters, kind of the same thing. I always come back to, always come back to it. And timely for this time of year, what is your favorite Halloween candy?
Reese's.
If you say candy corn, I was going to say, if you say candy corn, we can't be friends anymore.
No, Reese's all the way.
Nice. So do you like the original Reese's size, or do you like the mini cups?
I think the best ones are when they do special ones, when it's like a pumpkin or a Christmas tree or a Easter bunny or
yeah.
I like those a lot.
Nice. That's controversial. I think some Reese's purists might be upset.
Yeah.
And so last movie you saw, or what you're most excited to see that's coming out soon?
The last movie I saw, I watched, oh, you know what? The first time I went to the movies after having the baby, my older daughters and I went to see the movie Beast with like Idris Elba, and he's like fighting lions, and it's probably not a great movie, but I was really like blown away by it because I hadn't been to a movie in so long. So I'll go with that.
I love it. That's amazing. That one is for me a little bit, it seems like there would be a lot of jump scares, and that's not mine. That's not me. I can wait till that. Oh, nope. Hocus Pocus is about as scary as I want to get. So that is the end of our lightning round, but I just want to say thank you so much, Ambassador, for taking the time to join us this evening. You are truly an inspiration, not only here in our state, but across the nation. I know we all look forward to whatever's next for you, and I'm so glad you're in our community. But I just want to open the floor for any last thoughts or words before we wrap up and let you get back to that beautiful family of yours.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. And I'm so glad to be seeing you doing this work. And I think you're super inspiring, your work down there on, one of probably the most influential city councils in the state of Maine. I think it's incredible what you're doing. And we're gearing up for the new legislative session, and I'm working again, but also home with my baby. So hopefully my thoughts we're a little cohesive here tonight. And yeah, I'm so glad that we got to catch up and do it in such a cool way and sharing with other folks.
Absolutely amazing. I am very excited for this next year and to continue to follow your little family and all that they do. So again, thank you all, everyone out there too, for joining us this evening. We know that when we increase our representation at all levels in all spaces, our voice claims space in conversation, decisions, and actions that directly impact us. And so what we do, and we need your help in doing this, if you know someone who would be a great candidate for office, or if you've been thinking about running for office yourself, please visit our website at advancednativepl.org and learn more about our programs. We have 2 national leadership trainings coming up in early 2023, and we would love to talk to you about it. So, and have a wonderful evening, everyone. Thank you.